Today we're continuing in Genesis 32 our series of mini messages about Jacob wrestling with God. So there was a wrestling match that lasted all night. The hip is dislocated, but Jacob won't let go. He's still hanging on, and he asks for a blessing. And then in verses 27 through 29, we see this. We see this blessing. It says, "What is your name?" the man asked. And he replied, "Jacob." In verse 28, he says, "Your name will no longer be Jacob," the man told him. "From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won." "Please tell me your name," Jacob said. "Why do you want to know my name?" the man replied. Then he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob had to kind of feel maybe even a little bit of a sense of shame with admitting what his name was, because it literally means deceiver. But he gives it to him. And we all want to think highly of ourselves. We all want to think of ourselves as above board, good people, perfect folks. But we're all obstinate. We all rebel. And we don't like to admit that to God. We want to put our best foot forward to God. We don't want to admit our failures so many times. And that's to our detriment. We need to get honest with God sometimes and admit our failures, admit our needs, admit our shortcomings, admit what we need from Him and the help that we desire and the help that we can't get through the world and life without. So Jacob has to admit that here. And then his name is changed. And it says, "You will be called now Israel." Now that's interesting. We're changing his name. And I believe we can go to a map today and look over on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean and see a little spot called Israel. So here, thousands of years later, the name of Israel is still on everybody's lips. It is still an incredibly important place in the world and still a center of all the world's activity. Eyes are always drawn towards Israel. But Israel, the name itself, it's a compound of two words. One being Sarah, which means fight, struggle, or rule. And then El, meaning God. And so as we have transliterated this, that's where we get the word Israel. And some take it to mean he who struggles with God or he who rules with God. But in Hebrew, it doesn't always mean that. Sometimes God is not the object of the verb, but the subject, to get you back into your English class. Tomorrow we'll be diagramming sentences. But when I think about this, it could also likely mean God rules. And that's an important thing for you to think about. See, God was ruled by Jacob. He fought with God and with men, and he won. But he didn't win by really defeating God. He won by holding on. He won by submitting, by understanding he lost, but by hanging on to God and continuing to want His presence and to continue to want His blessing. You only win with God by losing. You win with God by saying, "Lord, you win." That's counterintuitive to us, right? We keep score in everything in life. But with God, the only way we win is if we lose and we set aside our desires, our wants, what we may be after, and say, "God, not my way, but your way." This is Jacob's moment of doing that, wrestling with God. See you soon.